All right, I have stripped the forms. Took it about an hour and a half. And I think everything looks good. So I raked back on the inside so I can walk around and work easily. I need to move this big old deal. I see I should have pulled these boards. I mean, I can chip them flat, but there's kind of some edges there that I'll just have to knock flat with the sledgehammer. But should have pulled those right after and just smoothed it out a little bit. I think everything looks really flat. There's a couple. I had my son working right here doing the mag across here, and he left a ridge here, which I'll just have to chip out. Otherwise it sends the board up and over it. Skews everything, but everything else looks really smooth and good. So I'm very pleased with how that turned out. Now I get to learn how to form these walls. So, got all the equipment on that trailer and we'll go start pulling it. Getting these boards laid out for the exterior, and then I'll probably lay some here for the interior as well. And then I am wiring these runners across. Normally in a wall you'd do 2 rows at least for this height. It's 30 inches. These boards are 30 inches. But for this greenhouse, I'm just tying the stems together and putting a little bit of rigidity into the wall to tie it to the base. I will bend some corners and do these corners just because that'll make me feel better. And then here I need to cut this down a little bit because I'm going to have to drop a form inside the wall to create the doorway opening. I should have moved that one side to the other. I didn't place those, so I forgot to tell them. It's looking good. All right, using my grinder and parts of my trailer, I bent up these corners, so we'll go tie those all in and start setting walls. Okay, I don't know the tricks to, all right, now where do you set the wall to make it centered on your footer and all that stuff. What I did do though is I set my outside perimeter pretty dead on. And so I'm going to play off that to begin with to get my lines, and then I'll check for square, and then I'll snap chalk lines for the outside. And I think I'm going to set the outside and then go from there. So I'm going to tape measure in, mark a pencil line, snap a chalk line, and then try and play off that straight line to get everything all squared out. All right, so I've got the chalk line snapped. It's 3 inches in from the outside edge, and based on my estimates, these are my tape measure. These are pretty close to center of the 6-inch wall. So. But we'll snap some outside chalk lines, square them up, and then play off that. Okay, I'm just using the 3-4-5 method, and you can double those dimensions. So if you measure out 3 and measure out 4, then the cross should be 5, and that tells you your corner is square. And you can just double that. So instead of 3, 4, 5, you can go 6, 8, 10, or you know, you can just keep doubling that dimension as long as your long is across here. So 3, 4, 5, and then you know if it's square. Ideally, if you can come out as far as you can with that, the best. So, but down in the corner, even if you just do 3, 4, 5, it should show that it's square. That one's dead square. So I squared up the outside edge of this so that I could play off of it. On the inside, I had a little bit of overlap of forms just so I didn't have to cut up all my boards and stuff like that. But I knew I wanted the outside edge. I cut all that wood exact, squared up those exteriors, and just had it dead on so that I could play off of that square straight edge on the outside. But I'm sure there's other methods for this and you can look those up, but this is what I'm doing. I'm gonna go around and check each corner for square. All right, just as I wanted, each of my corners is square, and so I can play off this chalk line that I've snapped all the way around. And it's 3 inches in with the assumption that the footer is approximately 12. And so my wall will be 6 inches. So I'll have these steel rods right up the middle of the wall. Again, as I mentioned before, with house footers, you want to see what the dimensions are supposed to be for your footers. I think it's 14 or 16 inches, depending on whether you have a 6-inch or an 8-inch wall and all of that. So I'm just doing a greenhouse and just practicing building a wall for the first time, so that if I want to do another home and I want to do my own footers and walls, I can do it. So this is going pretty smooth. I'm pleased. And I'm tying the corners. So here's the first corner all tied up. And we'll go and hit these others. I'm trying to leave some gaps so I can walk through for a while, and then I'll tie them up at the very end. We've got these snap ties with cupped washers, and I'm going for a 6-inch wall. Hopefully I've got enough here, but this is how you tie these walls together. So if you can set your outside, basically you're slipping it through the 2 holes. You're slipping them through, and then you're using these brackets to pin them on, and then you set a 2x4 down into the brackets, and it just creates a wall on the back side. And these are stemming out all the way around to the inside, and then you just bring boards to the inside, slip them over, and do the same thing. And I'll show you those brackets here in a minute. Working on these, I think I'm putting them on right. They might be upside down. And there are 2x4 sets in there. So you just slip that in there, slide that through here, through there, and then you just tap that with the hammer and it cinches this tight. And you lay a 2x4 back in there on both levels, and it pins that wall all together. I've got all these on. Hopefully I put them on correctly. I think I'm gonna lay some 2x4s. I've got to decide what to do about this. Do I just overhang off the edge? I don't think I cut these panels. I don't want to because they're not mine, but I thought I might have some gaps and I have to fill in with some plywood, but not this big of a gap. Okay, I've tapped in both boards, and on these I had a couple 16 footers or multiple from a spec house next door, and so I just threw those in so I could have one good solid wall here. And and I can't decide if I'm going to just run off this corner to make them stand up, or if I put the inside in to make it stand up. Probably run off this corner. So hopefully these are right side up. I would assume so. That way that wedges down in here and pins on. Otherwise, if it was flipped over, there wouldn't be much to hold that on there. So you can see the other side. So that's a good solid rigid wall there. Yeah, I think I'll start building out that way. All right, I've reached the end of the road here for the morning. I have to go buy more of these snap ties, the 6-inchers. Got a whole bunch of 8, but I only had this many 6. So yeah, count all my holes and get the approximations on how many I need, and an approximation, and then go buy a box. Probably pick her up again in the morning. What was I gonna say? Oh, I'm still trying to sort out in my mind how the corners work so that I can match this board here, tie in, and then fill in the gaps. So I'm gonna ask somebody, 'cause it's not making sense in my head, and I'll show you what I learn. I got all the boards laid out, so I should start going pretty smooth once I get my snap ties and get an understanding of how to tie the corners together. But it's not as difficult as I imagined, and seems to be going smooth. Okay, I'm moving along here. I filmed every little step of the way, but I think I'm gonna delete a bunch of that because I was figuring things out as I went. We'll see. But I'm learning how to put this together. Basically, you just slide one of these through this board and then set the clamp on and swing this up and tap it with the hammer, and it cinches it. And I just do that on one full side, and then I slip the other one up and over onto these. I cinch all of those, and then I have a unit sitting here. I've seen guys do the whole exterior wall and then come and do the interior, but and they'll put boards and pin the exterior wall so it's vertical, but I'm gonna fiddle with that after. So I'm just working my way through. These boards just set in on them, and then you just tap them in, and then you tighten these up, swing them back up, and then that cinches the wall so it's super sturdy. Doing the corners was tricky because you gotta think through, all right, I need to keep it 6 inches wide if that's how wide your wall is. How did these match up and all that, and then how's the outside? And I believe on the outside what you do is I'm going to move these boards down so they sit against here and creating a corner. And I believe you just cut a couple of these and slip them down in, and just, I guess you can screw them to the wood or just leave them sitting in there. So I'll probably back screw into them just to hold them in tight against the corner, but the cement will push it into that corner. What I did mess up on, and I don't care because this is a greenhouse, but if it was a house foundation, you need to do it right. These need to come up so that they're above here, and then you run a row of rebar on top of these, and you can tie into them and tie into these stems sticking up, and then you do the same thing up top. I wasn't gonna do 2 rows, and I couldn't decide how and if I wanted. I mean, I knew I wanted to do some rebar because these walls are tall enough, but it's a greenhouse, so I don't care a whole lot. And so I just did this, and then I realized I think I'm gonna undo all of these after I get the wall up and just reach down inside and drop this whole horizontal piece down to here and just reach in and retie them onto these stems and tie them every so often onto these. That way this wall won't float up. I don't think it will, it's so darn heavy, but cement can do crazy things. And if there's nothing holding that wall down, then it could float up. I don't know, I'm gonna ask my friend. Of that corner. So what I'm doing now is I'm going back in. I put just enough boards in on top or on the one on the outside just to stabilize. And now I'm going back in and cutting and putting them all in so they're tapped in and tight, and I'll lock all of this interior down. Then I'll go out and lock all of the exterior down and run the boards just right. And then I'll slip these in, put screws in, and then I'm gonna run a string line and straighten the walls. I've got my chalk lines down there running on the outside, so that's the main one I want set, because I'm gonna set my wall on the outside edge. I'm just gonna do a 2x4 wall. And so I want it on the outside edge, but then I'll get a level and level the walls, and I'll put braces. All right, the entire inside, the two rails are all buttoned up. Note, if you use this style of bracket, I've been hammering this piece and it causes this to swing, and the slope on this causes it to pinch and tighten. That one's not. Pinch and tighten against this 2x4. You really need to come back through and really give them a good whack and cause them to rotate over. I can see some of these I need to come back through. They're not over enough, like this one's not even touching. But it's looking good. Time to jump to the outside and tie all that up, and I've got a couple of 3 corners that need me to fill in some pieces here. Okay, so here I've measured out the doorway. I want 35.5 inches, so I can run a board for framing in there and then put a door in of some kind, either one I make or one I buy. Haven't decided yet. And probably one I make. So I've cut 2 pieces, and I'm just gonna slide these down in here, and I don't need to put a bottom piece. It'll just self-level down in there, so it'll flow in and come up to the base of that and leave a pocket in there. So I'm gonna slide these in and put some screws in so I can take it out after it forms up. I'm gonna leave these pins in, and there won't be cement in there, there'll be a gap. All right, those are pinned into place, and they go 14 inches down, so I can run gravel underneath and kind of make the depth is what I want. I'm not sure what the level will be out here once we put in topsoil and grass and stuff. So, but now I've got my entrance in. The other thing I remembered to do is cut about a 4-inch or 5-inch plastic pipe. I've been keeping that since our house build, and I slid it down there and wedged it on top of one of these, and then I put 2 screws in and rolled it over till they caught those 2 screws that are just sitting inside the pipe. So it'll just pin there, and that should put it about 6 or 8 inches below the ground level, I think. So maybe 10 inches below ground by the time we get sod and topsoil. So I can run a sprinkler line in here on its own. Actually, I might put a whole valve box in here and run multiple valves so I can have multiple types of watering going on. I've tied all my corners together. As you can see, I'm gonna put a small piece of wood and a screw and a screw, screw and a screw on each of those on the outside where I need to. But otherwise, she's all buttoned up. So my next phase, which will probably be in the cool of the morning, maybe Thursday morning, before we pour that afternoon, I'll get string set up and straighten up my lines, although this one looks pretty straight. That one has a little curve in the middle. The ends look pretty straight too. It was nice having that exterior chalk line just 3 inches in from the outside edge, because I'd set the outside edge of the footers to be perfectly square. It was nice to be able to just run off that. And I think it looks good. Normally with a house, you would maybe set your laser up and set the elevation and put a nail in and maybe snap a chalk line inside there at the ends once you have your elevation set, and then just fill up to that line. They'll even tap in a nail along there on the chalk line, so that as the cement comes up, or as it pours in and covers the chalk line, they know to come up to the cement wherever it is, and that way they stay just below the lip but on level. I've seen them do that. They did that on our house. Or if you feel good about your footer, you can just ride the top of these, and if you've got a little high spot, you can grinder it down. All right, what I'm doing this morning is just like we straighten up walls on a house, I've put a block in with a screw or a nail on each end, and then you run a string line, and you can see it's 1.5 inches wide here and 1.5 inches wide there, and in the middle you can see the bow. So I can measure as I go across and then push the wall in with braces to get it to be 1.5 inches all the way. So typically in the middle you're going to get a curve, or you might even get a little bit of a roller coaster. I can see right here it's about 1 inch, so I'm about 1/2 inch in. So I'm just going to push that in with a brace, stake it, screw it to here. I'm going to work my way around and do that. 1, to straighten the walls, but 2, to create stability for the walls so they stay in place. So that's the first thing. Beautiful morning. So just to show you on this opposite wall, you just come in and make sure it's at 1.5 inches. 1.5 inches. Just as you move along, and if you've got a curve, then you push it in. And on those house walls, where often you're building them in segments, 10 or 12, 16-foot pieces, where the seams are, you tend to have a little bit of a funny curve to them a little bit, and so you straighten them out with boards pried up inside or pulled back inside and nailed into the side of it. Anyway, on this, because these are pretty rigid, and I tried to avoid, like if there's a seam here, I didn't put a seam above it to try and straighten it out as much as possible with these boards. Because of that and the nature of this wall, these have been pretty dead on. I had one little spot there that was 1/4 inch, and in the middle it was 1/4 inch off. So I'm just gonna stake 2 pieces here and should be good to go. All right, I feel like I've got it pretty well braced with stakes and boards all the way around. I might throw a couple more in, but when pouring a wall, you can't brace it too much, but you can brace it too little. It'll blow out and do crazy things just because of the pressure of the concrete, especially if they're using a hose. But, just the pressure of the concrete, the weight of it is so extreme, it'll just push and pull and cause it to do crazy crap. So I doubled up more screws in the corners. I feel like those are gonna hold the corners really tight. My biggest concern is it flipping one way or the other, especially because I don't have 2 horizontal rows of rebar going in here to tie the wall all locked in tight. So I'm not sure what to do about that, but anyway, I'm gonna go through and try and figure out what to do with the rebar. So what I'm doing to keep this wall from floating up in case the cement tries to lift the wall, which it can, but I don't think it will on this wall. It's so solid and heavy and tied together, but I just wanted it. So I don't know if you can see down there. Let me try and get this. So I'm tying to the rebar below the crossbar and then wiring to each of those crossbars. So every rebar coming up has some pretty hefty wire wrapping around it, and I'm twisting them tight with these guys, and then coming up and wrapping around the bar and sometimes back down to it. So if there is some lift, there'll be a tug on that, and it's not going to lift more than 1/8 of an inch, most likely, if at all. So I'm just going around doing that all the way around. Like I said, if it was a real wall, I would run my rebar up above here, and then I'd run 2 horizontal lines on top of each one of these sets and just wire them all together so the wall's just like super locked together. But greenhouse, it is what it is. Don't cut yourself when you're wiring things up. It's the last wire too. So I've gone back in and set more stakes and screwed them into the sides on the outside all the way around and on the inside. So we're pretty braced up. I think we're ready to pour. I did go in and some of the inside seams where the board meets, I screwed those 2x4s in just to make that wall more rigid. I did the same thing in that corner. So I might throw one on top right there too. But that way those inner walls are super locked in. So I think we're ready. I think I have a few more hours till they come this afternoon to pour. I need to go buy the bolts that slip down in for going around after and just putting them in place so I can anchor the walls. So I'm marking where to put the J bolts, those little L-shaped bolts that stick down that you fix the base plates to going around the sill plates or the walls. And I'm putting about every 4 feet, and I'm marking layout all the way down here so they'll sit in between my studs, which are every 16 inches. So that way I don't have to fight with the bolts. On that house, I'd cut off half the bolts because they had them right where a joist was, or it was just so annoying instead of just taking 10 minutes to mark layout. So I'll start at that end, come this way, start at that end and come this way, and then I'll go east to west on those 2 walls, I think. So. All right, everything is marked, the arrow and the circle. I did the same on the inside so that we can go along. And then to get it at the center of a 2x4, we need 2 fingers in. That's about 1.5 inches. That leaves us about a 1/2 inch for the bolt, or 5/8, and then 1.5 inches on the other side. So that's another thing on this house is they had kids doing it instead of the adults, and they did the same on this. And there was a roller coaster of just stupid bolts set back and forth, some outside the sill plate, some in it, some on the edge of it. It's just ridiculous. So we're gonna set them 2 inches in from the edge, the inside edge of the cement there, not the inside edge, but from here. Just mark them and then set the bolt right here, and then it won't interfere with studs, and it'll be centered on the plate. So, all right, here's the J bolt. So you just work it down in there pretty quick after you pour, and then just the threads stick up. The thing we're gonna do is, normally on a house I'd have it's a tool you cram down in there. It's almost like a tube. It's all flexible and it vibrates and it settles the cement, keeps you from having, it gives it a smooth face on the inside instead of having air pockets. It gets the air pockets out. But I'm not really worried about that in the greenhouse, so we'll probably just, for sure on the corners, run this guy, a Sawzall, and just let it vibrate down the corners to really settle those. That's where you have air pockets a lot. And then we might just walk along and quickly do the walls as well. All right, here we go. I might video as we pour, but I might not, depending on how hectic it gets. Here we go. Makes it easy. Yeah. Alrighty, we are done pouring. Took like a half hour. That was easy. 2 days to form it, and then 2 full days to form it because I was working by myself and figuring things out as I went. But I had Greg come over and help me, and these are his forms that he rented from a guy for another job. He loaned them to me, so. Anyway, just saved thousands and thousands of dollars, so doing it myself. It cost about $600 in cement for the wall, and about maybe 200 for the footers, maybe 300. So less than 1,000 in cement, and then being able to rent the forms, I don't know what that would have cost, maybe a few $100 bucks, but they were free. So sweet. So we'll let it dry tonight and I'll pull it tomorrow, and I'll backfill it on Monday. Tomorrow's Friday. Backfill it on Monday after it cures a few more days and I rent the skid steer. All right, that's the greenhouse. I'm excited.